Hello everyone, my name is Greg and I dev stuff. Welcome to episode 24 of action RPG game in Unity, ability panel and potion panel. So tonight we want to introduce an ability panel to be able to cast abilities. So on the UI, let's make a panel. Then on this panel, let's say 6 buttons for skills by prefabbing the button. That's how many skills on the panel in the Path of Exile, right? I'm not gonna lie, I never played it that much, so I don't remember. Let me know in the comment if I'm wrong on the skill button count. Don't overstress the positioning of the panel and buttons. Right now let's just make a functional UI. We can always reposition them later. Then let's make potion buttons. To make sure it is an individual new prefab, let's unpack it before prefabbing the new potion button. Okay, now we have a bunch of buttons, so when we press on them, we want to activate an ability or a potion. Select Ability Panel and create another new component called Ability Panel. This script will be responsible for managing the ability buttons and potion buttons on the panel. Inside we will make a new method called ActivateAbility. Where we will post the slot number of the activated ability. Okay. And make same thing for potions. So, a new method and post into debug that you activated potion of a certain number. In the Unity we have to call this method of activate ability from the buttons. So go through each of the button and call the activate ability. Pass the ID of the button. So first button is 0 and second one is 1, etc, etc. Do the same for potion buttons. Good. Now if we launch the game, we should be able to click on the buttons and activate the abilities or potions, which we will see as messages in the debug console. Please consider supporting me on Patreon. You will get cool perks like being featured like those cool people you can see right now on your screen, or access to project files on Patreon. Your support will help me to do this full time. With this implemented, we want to use a new input system for the controls. New input system in Unity is much more modular and practical solution for control, but it's a little more complicated to set up. To utilize new input system, we need to import the input package into the Unity. In the Unity Package Manager, you will be able to find the input package if you open the Unity registry. It looks confusing at first, but when you get a handle of it, it's an amazing and easily scalable tool with good future-proof capability. Download and install it. If it is asked for restart, say yes. Now we need to update our input system to utilize new input system. Select Event System and replace the outdated event system with a new one. Now we need to update all the input system we have ruined with our introduction of new input system. First, let's comment out all our inputs. So let's be launching the game and commenting any part of the code which call to input library and causing an error. Good. So now we need to map our presses, our inputs, to some kind of actions. To do this, create an action map, which you can find on the absolute bottom of this chunky list. Open newly created input action map. It will open this input map interface, where we will map out the control scheme for our player. It's separated into 3 panels. The most left one is action maps. Action maps represent a group of the action mapped for certain gameplay feature. For example, you have a GTA game, where you have third-person controls, which will be one action map, and second map will be responsible for driving controls. This means you can easily swap between those two action maps. When your player is exploring, you're using third-person controls, and when your player is driving, you're using the driving controls. Then we need to add actions and map an input for this action. First, let's map the mouse position on the screen, which is the value we are going to read from our input device, which is represented by vector2 value type. So we can map this action to mouse position. Click Save Asset. To utilize our input action map, we need to add the player input component. This component is responsible for managing which input action map we are using for input right now, and communicating the input from the player based on this input map to the game. And as you can see, we need to reference the player input action map over here and reference the camera. Let's set the behavior to the invoke Unity events. This set how your player input component will be communicating the input from the player to the Unity. This episode is not about Unity input system, so I will not be going too much in depth into them, but just if you want more expanded explanation how the system works and what's the difference between all the behaviors and all the settings, let me know in the comment, and if there is enough interest, I might make an episode about it. This is the most easiest and convenient behavior for player input. This type of behavior will create those kind of Unity action fields where you can simply reference public method to be called when the player presses the mapped out button associated with this action. So let's make a function which will process the mouse input. Create a new public method which will accept callback context as a parameter. Import the Unity input system so we will be able to reference the callback context. Callback context is the carrier of the data between the input system and gameplay systems. It carries all the necessary values related to the player input of that action. So for example, if it's an input of mouse position, it will carry the value of the mouse position input from the input device. This will allow us to read the state of the input from the event and save it into variable. Let's pause the mouse position into the debug log to test it. I don't like that we're reusing and rewriting the same variable. Let's introduce a new variable for intersection point in the world based on the array we shoot in our update. Good. Now in the Unity, let's comment out this part to get rid of the error. And we need to reference the newly created method to the mouse position action on the player input, which method need to be called when we receive an input from the player, and this method will process this input accordingly. Let's remove comment from the move input, but it's for the future. Right now we're just expecting to receive a debug log in the console. So now in the character movement input we should be able to use our mouse input in the same way as we used to do before. Just now we're going to use an intersection point variable. Let's test this. Good. And we want to call this move input to move the character around. We used to call it from player character input from the update. So let's introduce a new method called left mouse button input handle. And by clicking the left mouse button, we will move our character. So now we need to receive an input from the left mouse button. So we need to map out this new input from our left mouse button. Open input action map. Introduce a new action called left mouse button. Set it to be button and map it to the left mouse button. And now we need to link the action we just created with some method. So when this action is pressed, when your left mouse button is pressed, then this method will be called. So we already have a left mouse button input method prepared, so link it to the event of pressing your left mouse button. Good. If I launch the game right now, it will allow us to move around. Good. We can move our character. And now we need to restore the interact input and attack input. Let's introduce a callback context. And after we add the callback as our parameter, go back to the Unity editor and restore the reference to the method, because changing the description of the method will break the reference. Good, now let's reintroduce an interact and attack input. For our interact and attack to function, we need to update the object we are hovering over with our mouse. To do so, in interact input, we need to introduce a new mouse position variable and read the value from the action we input. And we once again feed this new method to the event in our player input. Now interact input is reading the mouse input. Interact input works, but for some reason attack input doesn't. Let's check it. Oh, I commented out the attack input. Sorry. Now everything works once again and it is much cleaner looking. Let's move the check into this method. I know about the warning, don't worry, we will fix it in the next episode. Good, we are done re-implementing our mouse input to use new input system. In the next episode we will introduce hotkeys for opening the panels and to call abilities and potions from the bar. Good, this is it for this episode. Special thank you to The Salt Hashdu and Stormbreaker 9000 for their generous support. With best regards, see you in the next episode.